In today's episode, I do some landscaping, build a dry stone wall, and create a crossing. Hello everyone, welcome back to my channel, That Model Railway Guy, for the start of another series documenting the build of my modular layout, also known as Pitley Steam Railway. It's so good to be back, and as always we have some sponsors for the series who help make these videos possible. Today it's D-Rails and Model Railway Scenes, both fantastic retailers that I'll be talking about a little bit later on. Now, as you may remember, Pitley is booked in for an exhibition at the Spa Valley Railway, which at the time of filming is just a couple of months away now. Last series focused entirely on the station area and getting that up to scratch, which has made a big difference to the main part of the layout. Currently, there's just one module that still needs scenery, but I also have some big plans which will affect one side of the layout in particular. So let's take a look at what I've got in mind. Like I said, there's one scenic module left to complete down here in the corner. That's going to be the focus of today's video, and once this is done, technically the layout could go to the exhibition. However, I'd like to extend the layout, adding in two brand new modules to create a longer run. This will also give me and my operating team a bit more space on the inside of the layout, since at the moment it's quite snug. And then if I manage to get all that done, the next job will be to rebuild the two large square modules on this side of the layout to match the new curved design. This will make transporting them a lot easier, and I've got some exciting scenic ideas for them too. So let's get to work on today's module, which luckily for me already has the track laid, so we can just jump straight in with the scenic work. The plan I have for this module is for it to be a field with a small crossing running over the track. And when I say crossing, I mean like a farm track or a foot crossing for the farmer, rather than a proper level crossing. I've started off by adding polystyrene blocks behind the end plates that are cut to the same profile. These will give the end plates a bit of extra support and gives me a level to work towards with the rest of the scenics. I'll also use larger polystyrene blocks to act as the basic support for the rest of the landscape. These will essentially act as pillars that I can then lay chicken wire over the top, which is my preferred method for doing larger sections of landscape. I do like working with polystyrene because it's really lightweight, which is great for a portable layout like this one. Now it's time to get the chicken wire laid over the top. This has already been cut to a rough size, and as I lay it over the polystyrene, the edges are stapled to the baseboard to hold it in place. The excess can then be trimmed away for the outer edges. Where the wire is on top of the polystyrene, the prongs at the edges can just be pushed down into the material, which will also keep it in place. This is less secure than the staples, of course, but it's enough to hold the general shape as we put on the next layer. So it's time for some good old-fashioned messy modelling now, as the next step is to add paper mache all over the chicken wire. And this is just strips of newspaper soaked in a watery PVA glue mix. You may notice as well that I'm using a brush to help it all lay flat on the chicken wire. This will also help the overlap strips bind together better to create a slightly stronger and more unified layer. Now, if you're planning to build your own layout, you're going to need some supplies, and for that, I recommend D-Rail's Model Shop. D-Rails have very kindly sponsored this series, and they've been long-time supporters of what I do here on the channel. As I'm sure you all know, I've been a big fan of theirs for a while myself, and I buy a lot of my locos and modelling supplies directly from them. They're always really friendly to talk to if you ever have an issue or questions. They're always more than happy to help you out, and honestly, I really like their free shipping option as well. You have to spend quite a lot of money with other model shops before they'll offer you free shipping, but you can get it at D-Rails for any order over £20, which I think shows that they genuinely do care about their customers. You can check them out online at drails.co.uk, there's a link to that down in the description of course, and you can browse everything they have on offer from N-Gauge, 00, even garden railway stuff and narrow gauge stuff too, so there really is something for everyone. Thanks again to D-Rails for sponsoring this series. With the paper mache now dry, you can see I have a nice shell creating the general shape of the landscape. This is quite delicate though, so I'm now going to add a layer of Mod Rock or plaster bandage over the top of this for added strength. As always, I've cut the bandage up into strips, and after a quick dip in some water to activate the plaster, it can be laid over the surface. If this was a static layout, you could probably get away with just the paper mache, but as these modules are all going to be moved around quite a bit, I want to make sure that the scenics aren't too delicate. For those of you wondering why I bothered to put the paper mache down first if I was just going to cover it up, well, it all comes down to weight. The Mod Rock when soaked in water is heavier, so it sags and you end up with the pattern of the chicken wire creating ridges across the entire landscape. The paper mache is much lighter though, so it just sits on top of the wire, creating a much smoother surface, which is then replicated when I put the Mod Rock on. The great thing about plaster bandage though is that unlike paper mache, this dries pretty quickly. You can see since laying the Mod Rock, I've also cut some fascias to match the landscape, which have been added to the sides of the module. This of course leaves a bit of a gap between the edge of the Mod Rock and the fascia, but this can easily be filled using a few extra strips of plaster bandage. The fascia just means that the polystyrene and chicken wire underneath is all hidden from view, and in my experience, blending it in with the Mod Rock like this creates a nice clean edge to the layout. And now it's time to paint the entire surface of the module brown using some cheap acrylic paint. I tend to mix a little bit of black into some burnt umber to create a slightly darker, more muddy colour, and this is going to act as the base layer for all of my scenics, so that the white of the plaster doesn't shine through the grass later on. And you can see I'm painting right up to the track here, or rather up to the cork base that the track is sitting on. Once the first layer is dry, I then like to go back over it with the paint watered down slightly. This helps it run into any gaps that I may have missed initially, such as the lattice of the plaster bandage that you can see here creating those white dots. Next up, it's time for some ballasting, using the usual technique of adding the ballast to the track dry and then covering it with glue later on. Using a brush, I can spread the ballast particles along the length of the track to make sure I get good even coverage. And similarly, I use a brush along the sides to create a somewhat defined edge to the ballast. Tapping the top of the rails with the end of a brush is also a really good way to get rid of any stray bits of ballast off the top of the sleepers and down into the gaps.
Once I'm happy with how the ballast looks on the module, I then give it all a quick spray of water with a drop or two of washing up liquid mixed in too. That's just to break the surface tension. The glue can then be added over the top of this, which again is the standard mix of 50% PVA, 50% water, and again a drop of washing up liquid mixed in. All being well, it should flow nicely over the track and will sink into the ballast to hold it all in place. As this is a fairly short module with no points or sidings, it actually doesn't take long in this instance, but obviously if you've got a larger layout, it's best to do this process in sections. And this glue will need plenty of time to dry properly before I move on to the next step. So I'm now going to leave this overnight and we'll come back in the morning.
Now, cast your mind back to the previous series and you'll remember I added a lot of detailing around the station area, a lot of which was made possible by our other sponsor today, Model Railway Scenes. They have an amazing range of 3D printed products which are perfect for any model railway. The prints themselves are really high quality and their range caters to all types of layouts from the steam era right through to present day. My particular favourite of theirs is the custom station signs, which you can see here. I've got some specifically made up for Pitley, and with these you literally just type in the name you want and they'll 3D print them for you. It really is that simple and they look amazing on the layout. Model Railway Scenes have very kindly offered you guys a discount code on their 3D printed range. Just use the code TMRG2023 to get 25% off your order. It's really kind of them to offer that, and as someone who has used their products extensively on this layout, I definitely think they're worth checking out. Head over to their website modelrailwayscenes.com or click the link down in the description, and don't forget to use that discount code when you make an order.
Back to the layout, the ballast is now rock solid, so it's time to move on to the next step of adding a dirt verge along the edge of the line side. As always, I like to do this so that the grass can thin out more realistically, and right now I'm just sprinkling the dirt on dry. As I've said in the past, this is dirt I get from my garden, which is fully dried and sieved down into a really fine powder. Don't forget, it's important to make this a little bit wider than you want as well, so that you can blend the grass into it. Now, I mentioned I was going to have a farm track crossing over the line on this module too, so here I'm building out the dirt verge to where the pathway will run. To create the path itself, I'm then adding some powder from one of the Geoscenics kits I've got over the top of the dirt base layer. This is the powder intended for making potholes, but I really like the colour and I think it works well for a farm track instead of an actual road. Here you can see I've added a bit in between the rails as well, just to create the basis of the crossing. I'm just checking that the powder isn't going to cause any problems with the crossing. This is an older wagon and it actually has the deepest flanges on the wheels of any of my rolling stock, so if this can go through here without any problems, everything else should be fine. Now I'm going to fix all this down in the same way I did the ballast by spraying the whole thing with water first. Then exactly the same glue mix is used over the top to hold it all in place. Because it's quite thin PVA, it should still retain that dusty farmyard track look that the powder gives it, while still being nice and durable too. And I suppose if I'd have wanted to save time, I could have put the glue on this and the ballast at the same time, but you know what they say, hindsight is 20/20.
So the dirt verges and the pathway are both dry, and now it's time for a step that I'm really excited for.
As you can see, I've got some dry stone walling to add to the layout, and this is some new custom walling that I've made myself. In the previous series, I mentioned that the supply of walling I'd used in the past had gone downhill lately, and a lot of you have been really interested in what I was going to use as a replacement. Well, this is my own flexible dry stone walling, and I think it looks fantastic. The great thing with this is that the foam is durable, but it can bend really easily to create nice curves. More importantly though, this allows it to conform to the landscape so that I can have it going up and over the hills just like it would do in real life. That's always been the biggest problem for me with the rigid sections of walling that are available, is that they're always way too straight, and you can often see where one section ends and another begins. Now, my walling does come as sections too, but the pattern actually syncs up at the end so you can get an almost seamless join to create big long lengths.
Now, because a lot of you have been asking about this for your own projects and layouts, I'm excited to say that I'm going to have a go at making this available for anyone who is interested. So, it's currently available to pre-order right now. There's a link to it down in the description. And the reason it's on pre-order at the moment is just so I can gauge how much interest there is in this. Obviously, I'm a one-man band, I'm a YouTuber, not a retailer, and so I don't want to make a load of it if no one's interested, and similarly, if there's huge demand for it, I don't want to get overwhelmed by orders either. So, the important bit, cost. It'll be £12.99 for a pack which contains 5 sections, and each of those are 20 centimeters in length, so that's basically a meter of walling in each pack. Also, if you want to order multiple packs, I'll be doing a deal where you can get 3 of them for £32.97. That brings the cost of each pack down to about £10.99, so a little bit of a saving there for those of you who want to use this on really big projects. Like I say, I'm not a retailer, I'm certainly not doing this to get rich, it's just a way to make this available for those of you who have been asking about the walling. So definitely check out that link in the description, there's plenty more info on the website, along with some images of what it could look like on your layout.
As you can see though, it's all stuck down to the landscape really easily, and it looks the part already. With that done, I can now move on to the first layer of static grass, and as always, I begin by putting down a base of neat PVA glue. This initial layer of grass is going to cover the majority of the module, so I need to get into all the nooks and crannies, especially up around the dry stone wall. The first layer can then be added, and this is the Warworld Scenics 2mm summer grass. These very short fibres do a great job at creating a real carpet of dense grass, which we can then add longer layers to over the top. And yes, the colour looks a bit too bright at the moment, that's because I'll be adding darker and more muted colours later on, but this works really well as a base. Once the glue on the base layer has dried, all the excess can be cleaned up using a handheld vacuum. And all this excess can easily be saved for use on another module later on. With the base layer now down, I'll use the layering spray over the top of this in preparation for the next covering of grass. And you can see I'm just using a bit of card to protect the walling from the glue, since we don't want any of the grass sticking to that. The next layer is then the 4mm spring grass, and again this is just going to be a general covering over the entire module. It doesn't matter if it's a bit thinner in some areas though, since we already have the base layer down. Also, with these slightly longer fibres, you can start to see the grass sticking up more now, which gives it a much more natural and wild look. The dirt verges around the crossing look really good, but to blend these in with the grass more, I'm adding some dots of PVA in random places to create some additional tufts. In this instance, I'm just going straight in with the 4mm fibres again to get a thinner, more patchy look to the grass. I'll continue this along the module too, repeating this process on the verge along the line side. And again, when the glue is dry, the excess can all be vacuumed up. The grass that's stuck down into the glue of course remains, and it gives us a really nice patchy look to the verges, with the grass fading out more naturally. Finally, I'll add some more layering spray to the field for the final 6mm fibres that I'm going to add. This is a dead grass colour that I like using in more exposed and open areas where the sun would dry out the grass in real life. It is a subtle effect, but it just tones down the green a little bit and gives the overall colour a more realistic tint. Static grass really does transform the layout though. All of a sudden this module has gone from looking like a building site to a nice open field. Now I can just add a few extra details to really finish off the scene, and the most important thing here is to have some line-side fencing. For this I've laser cut a load of fence posts which I can then put all along the side of the track. With a small hole drilled, the bottom of the post is dipped in PVA and then set into the hole. I've also made a quick spacer from some foam board just to give me a rough idea of where the next post along should be. This will keep the spacing nice and consistent. The main thing here is to make sure I've got all the holes for the wire that I'll add later facing in the right direction. And then generally I work my way along the baseboard, putting in posts every couple of centimetres. And here you can see what the finished fencing looks like now with the wire installed. This was threaded through the holes in the post using a pair of tweezers, and honestly I thought this was going to be a nightmare, which is why I didn't film it. Actually though, once I got the technique down, it really wasn't too bad at all. I'll be doing more of this in future videos though, so don't worry, I'll be sure to film the entire process for those. The gates on either side are then placed in position 2 just to complete the crossing. And the last thing I'm going to do on this module is just add a little bit of clump foliage around the edges. Mostly I'll use it by the fence to hide some of the areas where my holes for the posts were a bit too noticeable. It's a nice little extra detail though that makes the world feel a bit more untidy, as you often see weeds and bushes like this growing alongside the track. I'll put some up by the wall too. Again, it works well around the edges, but generally I want to keep the field nice and open. And there we go, that is the module pretty much complete. With the scenery complete, I've cleaned the tops of the rails and now we can have a few trains running through. I'm really happy to finally have some scenics on this module. It's been over a year since I originally built it just because I wanted to complete the circuit. Now though, it fits in with the rest of the layout really well, and it's great to finally have trains running through the landscape again. The great thing is that all the modules now have scenery on them, apart from the fiddle yard of course, which means technically the layout could now go to the exhibition. Like I said at the start though, I've got plans for some brand new modules, and that's what we're going to be tackling in the upcoming episodes, so make sure you don't miss out on those. Of course, the next video in the series is available to watch right now for channel members, so if you can't wait, click the link in the description to become a member today. And of course, if this is your first time watching the channel, please don't forget to subscribe and hit the bell icon too to get notifications when new videos are released. That's it for today though. I do hope you've enjoyed this video, and here's a quick look at what's coming up in the next episode. I start a brand new module, paint up a cliff face from scratch, and do some fiddly scenic work.